Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grandstand Sports Data. In today's video, we will be continuing our 13 chapter series on the art of sports betting. We will be educating you on what we call the 13 pillars for turning you from a square to a sharp, with similar principles to the book The Art of War. We will be providing action steps through each of the chapters so you can improve your betting approach and get you betting more responsibly. We will also add our final thoughts from the 17 years of experience that we have betting on sports. So let's get right into it. Chapter 8, Fundamental Handicapping. Attack him where he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected. So that's not just words from Sun Tzu talking about war strategy. That's the mindset of a sharp fundamental handicapper. See, most bettors and even the sports books build lines from power ratings, statistical models, and then also they adjust on market perception. But here's the truth, those systems do have blind spots. They miss the human element. They don't account for a team emotionally checked out, for the travel grind, maybe, or for the under the radar coaching edge, or even a rival game where motivation throws everything out the window. That's where you come in. Fundamental handicapping is all about spotting what the models and public miss and striking before the market adjusts. So you're not just chasing numbers, you're reading the situation, the psychology, and the setup. And if you can get there first, you'll consistently find bets with value others never saw coming. So let's dig into it. Coming up next, we're going to show you exactly what is fundamental handicapping and how does it work. All right, let's break down what fundamental handicapping actually is. So, unlike technical handicapping, which is more stats driven, right? It leans on heavy on the numbers, the trends, and the systems. Fundamental handicapping is rooted in your understanding of the sport itself. You're looking at the why behind performance. Why did that team underperform on the road? Why might this squad be extra motivated after last week's loss? Why is this coaching matchup quietly a mismatch? It's going to be about reading situations, players, and teams through the lens of experience, emotion, and even sometimes the context. You're watching the games, you're tracking the coaches, and you're paying attention to body language, effort, and energy. And while it may start with an instinct, so some of your factors may just start off with an idea, the best fundamental bettors validate their hunches with data over time. So that's not going to stray too far from our technical analysis that we just showed you in the last chapter. So think about fundamental handicapping is it's not going to be just guessing, you're going to be making informed judgment. So to keep it structured, we break it into these three categories. Number one is going to be your core fundamental factors, and these are going to apply across every sport. Things like injuries, rest, or even travel fatigue. These are applicable to almost every sport. Doesn't matter if it's a team sport or if it's an individual. You could be handicapping soccer all the way down to Russian ping pong. There are certain metrics that need to be applied to every sport. That's going to lead us to our second column, which is secondary fundamental factors. And these are going to be a little bit more sport specific, right? Like schedule spots, maybe coaching, because coaching doesn't matter in every sport. It may matter in football and in hockey, and not much in baseball and basketball. So those are some of the things you need to pay attention to. We'll cover those as the video goes on, but these are applicable to some sports, not all. And that's going to lead us to number three, which is going to be the external factors. And these are beyond the control of the players or the coaches. This is going to be like officiating, maybe crowd influence, or even the weather, right? So here's the key for all of these. All the factors that we're going to walk through throughout this whole video are going to represent a trunk of a tree. I know it sounds a little crazy, but your job as a bettor is to start branching out. And the branches and the leaves are going to be the specific insights and angles that you're going to build off of the trunk. And that's where the real value is going to lie. So, for instance, we're going to talk about maybe a factor like travel. We don't want you to just simply measure the travel between the two teams. You could if you want, but that's not going to be profitable in the long term. So, we want you, say, if that travel represents a tree trunk, we want you to find those branches and find those leaves within that travel category to find a profitable angle. So let's get right into our core fundamental factors. Okay, so let's talk about the core fundamental factors. And these are going to be the ones that apply to every sport, every league, and every market. That's right. Big markets, small markets does not matter. These are going to be the backbone of fundamental handicapping. So let's go to number one, which is going to be home field or home court advantage. And this one's kind of obvious, right? But it's also often misused. I want you to go as far back as your model goes as far back. And what does that mean? So, if you're collecting about 3 years worth of historical data when you're building your models, that's how far back I want you to go for your home field or home court advantage. I want you to keep this one very simple. I know we touched on the last slide, the trunk metaphor, where some of these are going to be the ones in red are the trunk. So, home field would be the trunk, and then the branches off of that you'll go into deeper. So for an instance, matchups we're going to touch on coming up. Matchups would be the trunk, and then style versus style would be more of the branches. Player quality would be a branch, yada yada, and then you find leaves off of that branch, so on and so forth. But for home field, we wanted to keep it very simple. You stick to the trunk. You don't need to do anything sexy. I know some handicappers will go in depth, try to look at each team's home field, engage it. I wouldn't do that. I mean, it's not going to be the difference between huge gains and huge losses. I don't think so. Next is going to be matchups, and you got to remember that not all teams clash the same, right? You got to remember those style versus style. This can be an NFL, right? What specific offense does well against what specific defense? What style in MMA does better against another style in MMA? Those are the things that you kind of gauge, and when it comes to team sports, individual sports does not matter. You want to know the styles and how they do against each other. Next would be player quality, right? You want to know the quality of the players if you're doing team specific sports. Uh, for instance, you want to know the drop off from Patrick Mahomes to his backup, just in case of injuries, which we will touch on next. You're going to want to know, you know, the left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs and if he's healthy and what his drop off is if he's not playing, and then who the opposing pass rusher is that's going to exploit that weakness. You're going to want to know these things. When in whatever sport that you are trying to handicap, you need to know them. It's very crucial. Next and lastly will be pace and tempo. This is more for the totals bettors, right? The guys that like the overs or the unders. Pace and tempo is very simple. In NBA, they have a pace statistic, so how much shots they get off in a certain elapsed time. Same thing you can look at. I guess in soccer would be shots attempted, not necessarily on target. That doesn't tell you, how much volume they're putting off. That's just telling you how much the ball has hit the net. But you might want to just look at shots in total, shots attempted. That's going to give you, a better gauge of pace and tempo. Next, and one of the most important ones that models often miss, is going to be injuries. These are huge. Now, you want to use that player quality just to find out the well, let me start with telling you the difference between player quality and how it's used in injuries. Just like I said, you want to know the drop off when you're talking about player quality from Patrick Mahomes to Carson Wentz. Injuries is more going to be how do I measure Mahomes not playing? So what's going to be that number? What's going to be, say if it's an injury with an MMA specific circumstances? What if you hear about an injury in training? That's something that you need to account for your handicapping. So injuries are huge. They're never accounted for with numbers. You may need to put a number on it, especially if you're doing team sports. So maybe a scale of 1 through 5. If they have a number of injuries where it's going to impact who they are, maybe on that scale they get labeled a 5. Maybe they get labeled a 1 if there's not too many injuries. So putting a number scale, and we'll get into that going forward in the video. And then finally is going to be rest and fatigue for these core fundamentals. We're talking about those back-to-backs, right? The cross-country trips, or even playing 3 games in 4 nights. That all adds up. Some teams thrive on short rest, others fall apart. You should do your due diligence and kind of track these in your specific sport. All right, so let's wrap up these core fundamental factors. And we're going to start off with travel. So, travel matters more than people think, right? Especially when it involves time zones, international flights, or even a compressed schedule. Think about a West Coast team playing on an East Coast game. That can be rough when it comes to the hours. So, it's something that you kind of want to keep a look at. Motivation would be next. So, is it a revenge spot? Is the team locked into a playoff seeding or fighting for their life? Are they in a letdown spot after a huge win last week? So these are the emotional and psychological angles where sharp bettors usually take advantage. Next is going to be recent performance, and I want you to track this in some way, shape, or form, but remember, and please remember this, don't fall into that trap of the recency bias. That's the only thing when it comes to this. So please have a number to it, but don't fall victim to that recency bias. Last is going to be strength of competition. Think about it with those, a team off of a 5 game winning streak. It might not mean much when they're beating the bottom 5 teams. So you always want to evaluate who teams have played. We like that SRS number when it comes to sportsreference.com. They have it for, I want to say, the 4 major sports plus some college sports as well. And that SRS number is just a simple rating system that accounts for strength of competition. So the bottom line here is these are going to be the essentials tools. And when I say these, I'm talking about the last slide and this slide. So the core fundamental factors. Attention to all my technical handicappers, so all my statistical guys. This is going to be the bare minimum that I want from you when it comes to fundamental handicapping. So you must have these core factors accounted for no matter what your handicapping style is, or you will not win in the long run. It's that simple. So no matter what sport you handicap in, it does not matter. NFL, NBA, college hoops, soccer, you need to start here. And if you don't account for these core factors, you're not even playing the same game as the sports book. That's something that you need to remember. So let's move on to those secondary factors that we talked about earlier in this video. So now that we've covered the core factors, the ones that every bettor should know, we're going to shift to the secondary factors. And these don't apply to every sport, but what you want to do is you want to record keep them anyways. And then the ones that don't, you can throw away. And the ones that do apply to your sport, you're obviously going to want to keep them around. The first thing that we're going to talk about is talent. And this usually seems obvious to everyone, right? But sharp bettors, they don't just look at the highlight reels when it comes to measuring talent. They look at speed, strength, skill, size. All of this you want to understand, not just how talented a player is, but how their talent stacks up against their matchup, right? So a fast wide receiver doesn't mean much against an elite cornerback. Just like a crafty point guard might struggle against length. You want to match the talent to the matchup. That's one of the huge ones here. Next is going to be team chemistry and mentality. And this is, you can't measure this in a spreadsheet. You could maybe give them a scale of 1 to 5 on your teams. Like this team has a 5 in terms of team chemistry, but you can see it when you watch enough games, right? So do players trust each other? Are they mentally resilient? Think about some teams, they fold under pressure. Others rise, right? So this matters most in those high stakes situations, playoffs, close games, or even rivalry matchups. I would say that for team chemistry, if anybody here is going to be handicapping hockey, this is a must. Team chemistry is a must when you're handicapping hockey. Next is going to be schedule spots. One of the most underrated elements in betting is a team caught in a look ahead spot, right? They're distracted by a big game next week. Are they in a sandwich game, squeezed between two emotional matchups? Are they in a must-win scenario while the other team already locked up a playoff spot? So you got to look at the calendar, right? This is going to affect the mindset. You always need to check the calendar, see where these teams are playing, if that's what you're gauging. But just remember, those schedule spots are going to be crucial. I would say, especially in longer seasons. You're talking about NHL, NBA, 82 games. MLB 162. That's where you're going to want to look at schedule spots. Finally, is going to be coaching, and good coaches, they win bets, right? So look at the scheme. How adaptable are they in game adjustments? How disciplined are their teams? A coach who knows how to exploit mismatches can flip a game entirely. So a poor coach under pressure can lose you a cover or even lose you a game in the final minutes. These are some things that you want to take a look at. Also, we had a fifth one that we took out. It's not that we took it out, it's kind of merged into coaching, and that's game plans and strategy. So, depending on the sport, game plans and strategy might be different from coaching. Your sport might not have a coach, it might be an individual effort, whatever it is. But with game plans and strategy, this is where coaching is going to meet execution. Some teams thrive when they dictate tempo or style. One team is a heavy pressing defense while the other struggles with ball security. That could be a problem, or it could be an edge in your handicapping. Is one team built to control possession and the other just wants to run and gun? So you can look at those numbers as well. So there's a bunch of ways to go with this. Bottom line here, though, these secondary factors may not apply to every sport, but when they do, they're often the difference between a sharp bet and a blind guess. And the public misses these details, but you should not. So let's keep going and take a look at those external factors, the ones completely outside the player's control. So, like we were talking about, here's the last category of those fundamental factors: external factors. These are the things players and coaches can't control, but they absolutely impact how games are played. So these are also the types of edges that many models and public bettors completely overlook. So let's break them down with number one. It's going to be weather, right? One of the most obvious yet underrated factors in sports betting. Rain, wind, humidity, snow, they all affect gameplay, right? Wind can kill deep passing games in favor of the under. Rain and snow can lead to sloppy play and turnovers in your respective sport. Even heat and humidity wear down teams faster than you might think. That can work for both teams. Maybe teams are not as conditioned as their opponent, and it wears them down even more than usual. So that's something that you want to look at. Next is going to be venue and crowd. So this is where the game is played matters, and it matters a lot, right? Think about with altitude in Denver. It affects players' stamina and ball flight. Indoor versus outdoor. This is going to be, this is affecting noise, pace, and even injury risk. Surface type, think about tennis and baseball, clay, grass, turf, dirt. This has direct impact on how the game is played. And let's not forget the crowd, right? The rowdy home environments can rattle younger, undisciplined teams. Some people may ask what's the difference between venue and crowd compared to home field advantage. I would say that home field advantage is more of the number. It should be accounted for in every single handicapping. And then if you're in a place like Denver with the altitude, you want to find out that altitude number to add on to the home field advantage. That's what I would give you for advice. Next would be rule changes. Every year, leagues adjust something, right? Kickoff rules, shot clock resets, pitch clocks, yada yada, all these things. These changes shift pace, scoring, and style, which means old data may no longer apply. So if you're not keeping up with rule changes, you're handicapping a different version of the game that's been actually played. That's something you need to, focus on. Next is going to be, and you guessed it, officiating. That's right. This one's tricky, but sharp bettors pay close attention. Some referees call games tight, like lots of fouls. Others officials let teams play. In the NBA, this impacts totals and foul trouble. In the NFL, it changes how physical defenses can play. Umpires with wide strike zones. This is good for the under, good for pitching, right? Some of these trends are known in the betting world, but they're not always priced in, and that's what we want from you. So, bottom line here, external factors might be out of the player's hands, but that's exactly why they offer betting value. Models don't always factor them in. The public definitely does not. So if you can spot weather, venue quirks, or referee crew that skews outcomes, you've got yourself some hidden edge. All right, let's talk about how to actually handicap games using fundamental factors. So this isn't guesswork. A sharp bettor approaches this the same way an analyst would approach a new investment. You test it, track it, and only act when the edge is real. So here's how you do it step by step. The first one is going to be you want to test your factors, right? You want to start by logging any fundamental insights you're using. Think of it like scouting, but you log every factor in your record keeper just like you would with stats or trends. You can use a point scale to measure unquantified variables. For example, give severe weather a plus 2 or motivational edge a plus 1. So this gives you a consistent judgment calls instead of emotional hunches, right? That's going to move you on to number 2, which is going to be tracking or back test your angles. So you've got two options from there. You can track them live over time, log how often they appear and how often they win. So basically, day by day, you go by just checking which team has the edge in that specific factor. Or you can do number 2, which is back test. And this is by using historical results to instantly check whether your factor held up over the past seasons. So back testing is going to give you that quick validation where tracking gives you consistent insight going forward. Ideally, you should be doing both. You should be tracking new ones and maybe back testing some old ones. Number 3 will be evaluating with betting metrics, right? So once you've got your factors logged, judge their value like you would a stock. What's their win percentage? How often does it cash? What about profit and loss in terms of units? Are you making money? And then your return on investment, right? Is the risk worth the return? Advanced bettors can go even further with this. We've touched on this when it comes to standard deviation, Z scores, and even confidence levels. We will be touching on those in the record keeping chapter. So don't worry about that. We will give you more when it comes to those certain topics. Number four is going to be converting to a system. So now that you're building something with value, your record keeper becomes your gold mine, right? We've talked about this already uh, throughout this series. As you log more bets and outcomes, you'll start seeing patterns. And if you notice that West Coast teams on early East Coast kickoffs have consistently underperformed, that's going to be a system for you. And over time, you'll get a sense of how much that factor is worth, and maybe it moves the line a full point or even maybe more, but you'll start to be able to test that edge. Now, step number five is going to be a little bit of a bonus, and it's going to be for my technical handicappers, my more stat driven people, right? This is where your betting process comes full circle. You're going to want to integrate with your technical handicapping. So you're not just using technical stats or power ratings, you're adding real world context. If your model shows value and you have a confirmed fundamental edge, that bet just became a lot stronger. This is how you eliminate the noise and tighten your system. It all going to live in one place. So you take that fundamental factor, you insert it into your model, and you apply a weight to it. And that's going to have all your handicapping all in one spot. Bottom line here is that fundamental handicapping should be measured just like technical handicapping. If you're not quantifying your edges, you're just going to be guessing. But once you start tracking, testing, and integrating these factors, you'll stop guessing and start betting like a pro. All right, so let's talk about the advantages of using fundamental analysis in your sports betting strategy. These are the real world human factors that stats can't always account for, and that's where smart bettors get that edge. So let's start with number one, and that's going to be it fills the gaps technical models miss. So even the best models have blind spots. They don't know if a quarterback is playing with a sprained ankle, if a team is coming off a 5 game road trip, or if weather conditions are going to kill the passing game. And remember, stats describe the past, not the future. They don't predict emotion, motivation, or context. You do. Number two is going to be it gets you ahead of line moves. So when you're doing your homework and spotting something the market hasn't reacted to yet, maybe a flat spot, a travel disadvantage, or a coaching mismatch, you can place your bet before the public catches on. This is where early value lives, and often where your biggest edge is hiding. Number three is going to be it pairs well with technical models. And this isn't an either or game. You can plug injury adjustments, rest edges, or motivational angles directly into your model or use them to override red flags. Think of it as adding a human filter to your data, and it's going to make your model smarter and more grounded. It also can be a one-stop shop for all your handicapping needs, right? You'll have your fundamental and technical handicapping all in one place. Then if you're in a big market, you move right on to that market analysis. Now, number four, and finally, it's going to be it adds real depth to your handicapping. So you don't just know what the value is, you know why the value exists. Is it a tired team, a revenge spot, a media driven overreaction? When you understand what's really driving the line and how the public is going to react, you become way more than just a number cruncher, or way more than just a number cruncher. You become a strategist. So bottom line here is that fundamental analysis turns you into the kind of bettor who can spot value the models miss. And then you can act on it before the market corrects. And that's where that sharp money is going to live. All right, so now let's talk about the downsides when it comes to fundamental analysis. And the first one is going to be subjectivity and bias risk. Fundamental analysis is where you can think you're making a sharp call, but you're really just following a gut feeling or rooting for your favorite team. It's easy to convince yourself that a spot matters just because you want it to. You have to constantly check your emotions at the door, and that's not always easy, which is going to lead to number two, it's harder to quantify. So, unlike technical analysis where you got numbers and win percentages, fundamental edges usually require your own system for tracking and weighting. So, you have to create point values, log outcomes, and test your instincts over time. And that's going to take some real work, and most people will skip that step. My advice to you would be don't skip that step. Number three would be it may already be priced in. So let's say there's a big name injury. Yeah, it's important, but the market likely already adjusted. So if something is public knowledge, the value might already be gone. Just because a factor is real, it doesn't mean that it still has betting value. It might already be baked into that line, which is going to lead us to the fourth one. And finally, it's not always bettable. So you might spot something interesting like bad team chemistry or a potential letdown, but that doesn't mean there's a profitable wager available. Some insights are real, but not actionable. I always like to use the example when it comes to hockey. Some person that says, I'm always going to place a bet on the team with the black helmets. Well, that doesn't really tell you which teams are better. It's just, it's not bettable, basically, is what we're trying to get to. Bottom line here, though, is fundamental analysis can be powerful, but only if it's measured, tracked, and used carefully. So if you're not disciplined with it, it can lead you just as far in the wrong direction as the right one. So use it as a tool, not as a crutch. So, like we do with every chapter, we like to finish off with our final thoughts. And we just walked through a whole list of fundamental factors, right? We went through rest, motivation, travel, coaching, injuries, all of it, right? But here's the truth, those things, they're just trunks of the tree. We've talked about this. If all you ever do is bet based on the obvious stuff, oh, this team's tired, oh, that coach is great, then guess what? You're standing at the base of the tree while sharp bettors are already halfway up the branches. They're picking the fruit, right? Real value in betting doesn't just sit there and wait for you. You have to dig for it. You have to ask better questions. What type of rest edge matters most? Does it vary by sport? Does coaching only matter in certain spots? Then you've got to track it, test it, and go find those branches and those leaves that we talked about. And that's where you start to separate the professionals from the hobbyists. So let me give you an example from the technical side. Let's say you track NHL games and find that coaching edges hit at about 60%, rest edges at about 58%, and then your player quality edge or the player quality mismatch at about 62%. So you have all that data for NHL games. You can now assign weights to those and integrate them into your model. And guess what? You've now created a system that doesn't rely on just one factor, but on how they interact. And that's what real handicapping looks like. But I want to give you guys a heads up. Even those great edges, those great edges that we're talking about, sometimes they'll win one year and then they'll lose the next. That's going to be the variance that we always talk about here. And that's sports, right? That's what sports is. So what do you do in these specific, situations? You want to keep tracking. You want to keep refining. You want to test for the long-term sustainability. You build systems around what's respectable or what's repeatable, not just what's exciting. And if I can leave you with one piece of advice from all of my years of betting, is that when it comes to fundamental factors, there are no shortcuts. The only way to win long term is by combining a crap load of factors, both fundamental and statistical, into a system that you understand and trust and that is proven over time. So every time you ever thought, hey, I wonder if this team's traveling across country after a loss in overtime, do they do worse? Don't just wonder, track it, log it, test it, because you never know, that could be the next leaf you find that no one else sees, right? And with that, I want you guys to take care of your bankrolls. I want you guys to hit that like button if you learned something in this video. Also, drop a comment with your favorite factor or one that you're going to test in your model or in your record keeper for your respected sport. And if you're serious about your betting journey, please subscribe to Grandstand Sports Data because we believe that there is no better sports betting education out there. We'll see you guys in the next one.